Hi everyone. After the US, French and British military fired 105 missiles or whatever it was at three targets in Syria in response to the alleged chemical attack in Douma earlier this month, many people, myself included, who've become suspicious that we're not receiving the full picture about what is happening in Syria right now, have taken it upon themselves to find out more about Syria, what's going on in the country, what started the war, and what both sides were. I'm just trying to get a full picture and all the information. And what's emerged is incredibly worrying, at least for me, and I know it is for a lot of other people. Not only have investigations by trusted and, in some cases, multi-award winning journalists found there to be no real proof of a gas attack having taken place at all, but nearly all the reports we have seen come out from the ground in eastern Ghouta, where Douma is, have pointed to the now infamous video of children being hosed down with water. You'll see it on the screen here, a clip of it, being a staged event filmed by a group of people called the White Helmets. Now, for those of you who haven't seen them yet, listen to what these doctors, eyewitnesses, and reporters and civilians on the ground are saying about the event which happened on the 7th of April 2018.
I've just been in the town of Douma. I found the clinic where the film of the children frothing at the mouth and having water thrown at them was made. But the senior hospital doctor, who actually spoke very good English, who was there, told me that the video is real, that they were not suffering from gas poisoning, but suffering from panic and hypoxia, as he put it, because of the amount of dust in the tunnels in which they live. All through the years, people in the Douma area have been living beneath their own homes in tunnels and basements. And that night there was a lot of shelling by the Syrian army and by the Russian Air Force. And it produced a huge amount of dust and debris in the streets, and many people were finding it difficult to breathe. And when they reached the clinic, according to the doctor, someone shouted gas, and they panicked. But he did confirm that the film, the videotape, was indeed taken in the clinic there, the same clinic that I actually interviewed him in.
They are not qualified also. They came from outside the hospital and they do this thing.
So random people came in shouting that there was a chemical attack and started spraying people with water, but there was no chemicals?
No chemicals.
Okay.
هن كانوا عم بس.
هون صارت حالة فوضى حتى في مدنية
محدد. هن اللي اجوا هن كانوا عم يزتوا مي.
هلا هون مشان انا اكون صادق معك.
صاروا تخربطت.
وهون فوضى عالية.
Yeah, when they came and shouting, there was a big mess. People confused. When they are outside, they start to throw water. Others they also throw water.
إلا بس الأطباء والكادر هون ما ارتكز لهالحالات إنه هي إصابة وهن فقط إن في منهم مرضى ربو تأثروا فقط أو مرضى قريب عادي أو
all the doctors they deal with normal cases.
Okay.
Because outside it was dusty, or even inside.
Yeah.
Look now.
Yeah.
التهاب الطرق التنفسية علوية. أي مرض التهاب الطرق التنفسية علوية بيأثر بالحالات هي.
Something very important, because when others they were talking with him, I asked him if in that day any case died.
Yeah.
He said no.
No.
هلا انا ما شفت هون، انا كنت عم داوم بالعمليه، بس اللي بعرفه انا انه اغلب الاصابات اجت نتيجه رضي نتيجه المعارك، يعني اسمه اكثر.
All injured by like war injured.
No chemical attack.
ما في إصابة كيماوية.
ما في شيء، يعني اصابات اختناقيه نتيجه الردم، في ردم كثير، في ضرب كثير.
Because this area was war, smoke, sandy, so dust.
Okay.
This is normal case.
حالات معدودة، يعني حتى هي حالات معدودة.
Even this cases, few cases, not that much.
So no one died. He can confirm
ذاك
that.
اليوم سجلت حالة وفاة في المستشفى.
لا هلا من ناحية بالموضوع هذا ما سجل، أغلب إشارات اختناقية.
No deaths that day. So, like I asked the other doctor, the big question is, can you tell me about that video?
هذا الفيديو شو رأيك فيه؟ شفته أنت؟
الفيديو شفته.
شو رايك فيه؟
ما مفسر شيء لانه في قسم منه اصابات رديه، يعني في بعض
يعني هو الفيديو بشكل عام شو رايك فيه؟
ما مقنع يعني باي شيء طبيعي يعني نحن الاسعاف للحالات اذا كان يعني رديه بيجي ضغط اكثر من هيك، فالمفروض اذا كان في شيء كيماوي او شيء تجي مئات الحالات، فاشوف موظفين عم يتفتلوا.
It's very important because if chemical attacks supposed to receive hundreds cases. Even in that day, normal cases it was few cases, war or normal cases.
Okay. Okay.
It's important.
That's very important. What he didn't say anything about the video?
He explains that when I asked him about video.
Oh, and what did he say?
يعني شو بتعتقد الفيديو هذا صحيح؟
هلا هي طبعا احيانا بفوت شخص هو بوجه الاحداث، يعني بيجي شخص مثلا عامي او انسان مشبوه بيقول كيماوي، فالكل بصير يعني حتى اللي صار هذا اول شيء.
Like the doctor said, strangers they came said chemical attack, tactical attacks. The people, all of them scared about that. Start to put water and something, big mass. Same.
Okay. So, this is the question, was the attack fake? Was it not real?
يعني الاعتداء اسمه مو حقيقي يعني.
نحن ما وصلنا اي شيء حقيقي ولا شيء مفسر ولا في علامات يعني لا حلقات دبوسيه
No signs about chemical attack because when chemical attacks, the eyes, as he said, will be closed like this and hurt. And skin, nothing. So no sign about chemical attacks.
Now, what's troubling me most about all of this, apart from the fact that there's a likelihood here that it could be possible that we've bombed this country based on very flimsy evidence which is incorrect, which has cost a lot of taxpayer money and caused devastation to this country in Syria and these 3 places that they bombed. It's not only that, but the establishment and corporate media in the UK, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, have been almost silent on these reports that you just saw. And for the most part, they have taken it upon themselves, instead of reporting on what is being said, have decided to just attack the journalists themselves, including Robert Fisk, by the way, who is a 7-time Foreign Reporter of the Year, so he knows what he's doing. They just smear the reporters rather than report on what they're reporting. Now, these sometimes are independent journalists. You know, they've got careers and they've been trusted. So why all of a sudden are the mainstream media just not trusting them now and not reporting on what they're doing and just attacking them and smearing them? It's very, very fishy, if you ask me. And a lot of people, myself included, are of the opinion that this is a coordinated smear campaign by the establishment and corporate media, not just in the UK, but in the US and other countries as well. Now, the bias they are showing right now is clear to see. For anybody who has seen these reports from within Duma, I've done a video on how badly the BBC have been biased towards this coverage. I'll put a link above so you can see just examples of how they're only giving you one side of the story and they're not giving you the other side, which is contradictory. They'll show, for instance, a video of this little girl who, and it's on their website still, I believe, that was saying to the camera that she smelt gas and that it was a gas attack. Now, it's very convincing and it should be shown. However, they won't show this video of one of the little boys who were in that alleged gas attack, saying the event was nothing more than a staged event they had participated in. They were told to go to the hospital and they got water sprayed on them. They didn't know what they were doing, which is why the children were crying. They're crying. They didn't know what was happening. And then their families were rewarded by the rebels with food and rice afterwards. So this is really, really worrying. And these media outlets they seem only to report on matters which add weight to an attack having taken place, and totally ignore any credible reporting and credible information to the contrary of it. Now, that's not what a news agency should do. They should give the full facts to their audience, and so their audience can make an informed decision. They're not doing that. Why is it that they're not doing that? Why is it that the BBC, for instance, and I keep going back to the BBC because they're a UK organisation that tell us constantly that their reporting is fair and balanced, and there's the One Show. There's a show called the One Show in the UK that will have an expert on saying one thing, and then in the interests of balance will bring on an absolute nutcase who's saying something else. I mean, why will they do that on that show, on the BBC show, but then on their website just only give you half of the story with regards to Syria? It's very, very worrying that this is happening. It seems like they're hiding the truth, and they're spending all their time on screen, and the overwhelming majority on their website focusing on and attempting to discredit anything that Russia says, rather than reporting on what these independent journalists on the ground are saying and the evidence. It's becoming overwhelming that this gas attack didn't actually take place. Now, I know the OPCW are still to have their findings, and I know that they keep saying, the Western media keep saying, oh, they've been held up. Well, you know what? UK, France, America, you bombed the country the day before the OPCW was meant to get there. Okay, let's not forget that. Let's make sure in any further reports you mention that at the top of the bloody article. For instance, take a look at this reality check article from the BBC website. Just take a look. Now you can see here that it says it was noted on Russian TV that there are no photos of the victims in hospital. This whole article is just trying to debunk anything that the Russians have said with regards to the Skripal poisoning. And they're doing the same thing with Syria as well. But I just wanted to point to this, and it says it was noted on Russian TV that there are no photos of the victims in hospital. And they've shown here a video of Alexander Litvinenko in University Hospital. Now, that's how they've dispelled what the Russians have said. Now, that's not what the Russians have said. The Russians have said that there's no photos of the Skripals in hospital, which is correct. So they've tried to dispel this myth by showing a photo of Litvinenko instead. Now, that is, in my opinion, a clear case of bias. So the BBC, along with pretty much every corporate and establishment media outlet out there in the UK, and in other countries as well, like the US, are not giving us the full picture. They're just concentrating on this information war, as I heard one BBC reporter say in an interview the other day, with Russia. That's all they're doing. And when it comes to the group I mentioned earlier, the White Helmets, the group which the locals and the doctors in Duma, in this clinic in Duma, are telling reporters staged the gas attack video rather. The reporting is so biased, it's almost comical. If it not were the fact that it's so serious. For instance, has any media outlet, mainstream media outlet, reported on the images out there, the hundreds of images of white helmets holding ISIS flags and Al-Qaeda flags? Has any mainstream media outlet out there reported on the many videos where ISIS executed civilians and government forces, and then the white helmets came in literally seconds later and disposed of the bodies? So they were complicit in the murder of civilians and government forces. Has any media organisation reported on that at all that's in the mainstream, I'm talking specifically corporate or establishment media, has any of these media outlets reported on the over 60 instances that have been found where members of the White Helmets' social media pages showed them openly supporting ISIS or al-Nusra or the Army of Islam? Has any of them reported on that? Please, if you can find one, show it me, because I can't. I cannot find one. And has any mainstream media outlet reported on the findings of Carla Ortiz, who is a Bolivian actress, who is a US national, who went to Syria to try and help and to try and find out what was happening, and was totally amazed at what she found?
Hi everybody, I am Carla Ortiz. I am here in the city of Aleppo. We are in the headquarters of the White Helmets. We see here the main logo of the White Helmets. Over here, we see the teaching of how the White Helmets have to help. And right above, as you can see, is the logo of ISIS. Over here, we see the flag of al-Nusra. And here is another flag. And here we have a jacket of the White Helmets. A lot of the neighbors over here have said that they were not taking care of civilians, but only militants that carry weapons and fighters. Take your own conclusions. Al-Qaeda headquarters here, and just like not even 2 meters away, it is the White Helmets headquarters.
Now, I have not seen a single mainstream corporate or establishment media outlet report on any of these allegations against the White Helmets at all. In no way. Every article or report I have seen has been either in defence of them or a smear piece directed at the independent journalists who are bringing this information to light. So why is that? It's extremely worrying that rather than talk about what has been found, they just try to discredit excellent independent journalists such as Vanessa Beeley and Eva Bartlett. That's just 2 examples that I've been looking at a lot of their work recently. And what's most concerning me and many other people in this country, everybody I speak to about this who has seen these videos, what concerns us the most is not what is happening, even though that's extremely serious, but the revelations that both the US and the UK, along with other governments, and again I'll put them up here, are funding these White Helmets. It's very worrying. Here's a video from a few days ago from the US government openly admitting they're still funding them.
U.S. funding for them. Any funds that the U.S.
I'm sorry?
giving them. Has the funding, any funding that the U.S. was providing to this group, ended because of the pause?
As far as I'm aware, all of the work still continues. People's bills are still being paid. If there's anything that's a change to that, I'll certainly let you know.
The U.S. contributions are still flowing?
As far as I know, that is all still in play.
Can you just check that though, because there's an internal State Department document that says on April 15th that funding would have ended.
I will double.
You're not going to comment.
I will double check on that. If it's an internal document, I can't. We don't comment on internal documents, but I'm not aware of one floating around if there is one that says that. Okay, are we moving on? Okay.
Now it's quite difficult to find out the exact amount that the countries shown here have given the White Helmets in aid. But what we do know is, combined with, if you take them all combined, it's well in excess of $150 million. I saw one report saying that the UK government alone had given over £60 million. That's $90 million around there already. That's just one country. And I know that the US government it's at least a $25 million they've given. So taxpayer money is funding this organisation. MMTers are just about to lose their shit with me because I said the words taxpayer money, but anyway. Now these questions concern me deeply, They really do, especially when I see anyone who reports anything negative about the white helmets are just immediately attacked by the corporate and establishment media. It's almost as if, to me, at least, this is my opinion, but it's almost as if they are covering up for something. It's almost as if they are protecting the general public from knowing of these reports. It's almost as if they're covering up the truth and giving us propaganda. That's my opinion, and it's many other people's opinion too. And it's almost as if they know that if the public at large saw these many videos now and many reports on the white helmets saying that the white helmets are not all that they are cracked up to be, they would be extremely disturbed by what they had learned. And it's important to remember this, okay? This war in Syria was started by, it was instigated by the United States, a covert operation that the CIA instigated called Operation Timber Sycamore. You can look this up. It was the end of 2012, beginning of 2013. Now, they say it's winding down now. However, has another operation started? Is it winding down? We don't know the facts. We know that this is what started this civil war. It's not a civil war. This has been started by people outside the country, by terrorist organisations that the CIA through Saudi Arabia trained and armed. This is not a civil war. Outside people have come into the country to try and overthrow the government. It's very important to remember that. These rebels are not moderate. They're not moderate rebels from within the country. They're outside organisations such as the Army of Islam, ISIS and Al-Qaeda, the very people that we are supposed to be fighting against. Remember, it was Al-Qaeda that flew 2 planes into the Twin Towers that started all of this. Remember that. And now we're arming and training them? Something is seriously, seriously wrong here. I am trying desperately not to swear right now. So not only are we funding these terrorist organisations and causing an unimaginable suffering to the Syrian people, there are reports of these rebels that we are arming and training, taking refuge in hospitals that are empty now, by the way. These hospitals are empty. And then putting civilian Syrians in cages and then putting them on top of the hospitals so that when the Russian planes fly over, they're using them as human shields. They're putting them in cages on top of hospitals. Now just think about that. Think about that next time you hear a report in the Western media that says, oh, the Russians bombed a Syrian hospital. It's not as cut and dry as that. I'm sorry, I would get very, very worked up and frustrated about this. If these reports from civilians in Syria and the reporters on the ground in Syria are to be believed, and I do believe them for the most part, we are helping the terrorists and not the civilians. This is not a humanitarian problem. If it was a humanitarian problem, we'd be putting sanctions on Israel for their crimes against Palestinians, which is basically Gaza is just an open-air prison right now. We would be sanctioning Saudi Arabia for an almost genocide in Yemen. There's another report today that Saudi Arabia dropped a bomb on a wedding and killed 20 innocent Yemenis at a wedding with American-made bombs, and that plane could well have been refueled by an American or UK refueler on the way back to Saudi Arabia. This is messed up. And in Syria, the reports that are coming out from people who have been there, who are saying that the White Helmets bases are adorned with Al-Qaeda and Army of Islam flags. They're next door to the bases of Al-Qaeda and the Army of Islam. They're working hand in hand. There's reports of beheadings happening by these terrorists, and then the white helmets take the bodies away, and then when it's all said and done, they both get on the same bus to go back to the base, because the bases are right next door. Why are we funding these people who are causing these atrocities? Why? And why is it, if we are doing this, that the media are not informing the citizens of our countries of it? It's messed up. Just listen to Carla Ortiz in this video with Jimmy Dore of what she was told by civilians in Syria who were fleeing Aleppo after it was liberated. Just listen.
And all these activists that said that they were on the east side of Aleppo, it is not true, because there was no internet, and they were saying that they were dying and they were, getting burned. I saw the actual corridors that the Syrian army were forming with their bodies in order for people and civilians to live. I have documented all this. I've done some live videos about it. And as people were leaving, I was dumb enough at the time, with my innocence, I wanted to interview the famous white helmets, the people that were saving them. First of all, in Aleppo, nobody knew them, because they were saying, like, no, who are they? We don't know who they are. When I start showing them pictures, they'll say, oh, they're terrorists, Daesh. They work with al-Nusra. And they'll say, yes, they are the civil defense, but of the armed groups. And they said, like, they're together, they work together.
It's really worrying, isn't it? Especially when you consider Syria is a secular nation. You are not persecuted in Syria for your religion. And Christians, I believe, take up 10% of the country. They're not persecuted at all. If what these findings from these independent journalists are true. Women in Syria, by the looks of it and by what I can find, are treated far better and have far more rights than other Middle Eastern countries. President Assad of Syria, his chief political and media advisor is female. Syria was the first Middle Eastern country to have a female judge. Syrian women can vote and go to school from the age of 6 to 18. They have way more civil rights and women's rights in Syria than they do in other Middle Eastern countries that we support, such as Saudi Arabia. Now, I don't know for 100% which side these white helmets are on, but I do know that there are huge questions that need to be asked and answered before we continue giving them any more funding. Questions such as, why are we funding them when their leader, Raed Saleh, I think I've pronounced that right, I apologise if it's not, has been denied access to the United States because of alleged ties to terrorist organisations? Why are we funding them when Khaled Khatib, who filmed the video for the Netflix documentary White Helmets, was also denied access to the United States because of, well, they didn't say why, but it could very well be for the same reason as their leader was denied access. In my opinion, these questions have to be answered before any more money is given to the White Helmets. Any more public money is given to the White Helmets, which is why I have started a petition in the UK to get the government to debate on this. I've left a link to the petition below. I tried looking for another petition. I could only find one other petition that was closed because there was an election just after it was started, and it was closed straight away because that's the rules. Whenever there's an election, the petitions are stopped. And I call on other countries that are, again, I'll leave the list up here, other countries that have been funding this White Helmets, also known as the Civil Defence League. I call on my compatriots in those countries to start a similar petition or a similar movement to at least cease the funding to these organisations until an independent investigation is made. Now, I know I've talked a lot about Carlo Ortiz's interview with Jimmy Dore, but it really did. It affected me deeply, and I'll leave a link to it below, as I say, and you can watch it. It's an eye-opener. It really is. And it brings me back to, I want to come back to that interview, because she asked a very good question in that interview, which I'm a grown man halfway across the world, and when she asked this question, her reaction to it, it almost brought me to tears. Take a look.
This is Ghouta Today. These are the cages. This was Ghouta before the war. Can you stop for a second? Jimmy, how is it that we don't want that for Syria?
I know. I don't understand.
Look at that.
So
why do we want to see Syria in rubbles?
It's a good question, isn't it? Why are we doing this? Why? Why are we funding these terrorist organisations? Why are we funding the White Helmets without knowing fully which side they're on? Why don't we want this for Syria? Surely, with how much more advanced Syria is with regards to human rights, rights for women, we should be promoting Syria as a beacon for the rest of the Middle East rather than bombing the crap out of it. Why are we causing and funding this destruction, when if you look at the overwhelming amount of evidence and reports that are coming out there from independent journalists, why shouldn't we be supporting the people of Syria rather than bombing them? It makes no sense. And why is it that our mainstream media and corporate media and BBC, not just in the UK but in other countries, America definitely as well, why is it they are not reporting on these things? And when they talk about Syria, they only talk about Syria in terms of war and in terms of regime change. Syria is a democracy. A democracy. Assad, I think, got 82% support in the last election, which was made over 2 days, and women used to walk for a day to go and vote. Now, people will say, oh, Syria, it's a rigged election. You know what? America, if you are American and you say that it's a rigged election, or Russia is a rigged election, just take a look at your own elections first before you start casting aspersion on other countries. Take a look at the voter suppression. Take a look at what happened in the primaries. Don't point fingers at other countries before you know the facts. And I hope more people will see this video and start looking at Syria in a different light, and stop looking at Syria like the government seems to do as some sort of strategic plan in the Middle East, and start looking at Syria and thinking we should be advocating for peace with this country, not advocating for war. Thanks very much for watching. I'm sorry that this is not my normal video. I'm not speaking the same thing. I've actually scripted this, whereas I don't usually script a video, because I wanted to make sure that I said everything correctly, because it's something that really I get quite emotional about at the moment. I didn't want that to affect what I was saying. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your support. Thank you to all my patrons who support my channel. I couldn't do this without you. You have my eternal gratitude. Please, if you're in the UK, sign the petition. I'll put a link down to it below, and watch the videos that I've suggested. Until next time, peace and take care.